Thank you so much for this wonderful intro, Jordan and Vincent. We're so excited to be here today. We've been using Figma to design our products at Replika since pretty much the very beginning of Replika, and so it's been a long time. And we're thrilled to be part of this amazing community. So we're living through a revolution in conversational AI. It's been truly wild these last 2 years. But what we've noticed is that there's a lot of attention on AI, and not so much on the conversation itself. So today, we wanted to share some of the insights that we learned while building conversations using AI. We've been building conversational AI since 2012, over a decade now. We started with developing the tech to build chatbots, and we were the first company to publicly launch a chatbot that was fully powered by generative AI. We mostly focused on the tech side of things until 2015, when my best friend passed away. I missed him a lot. I kept going back to reread our text conversations, and so I used the AI models that we had developed back then to rebuild a version of him using AI so I could continue talking to him. A lot of people came to talk to Roman, and what we've noticed was very interesting, that people were sharing, they were being really vulnerable with AI, and they would even tell him things that they wouldn't tell their friends and family. So that gave us the idea for Replika, an AI friend that would be there for you 24/7 to talk to you about anything that's on your mind. Since then, Replika sparked friendships with millions of people all over the world. And I would say that single-handedly, Replika started the AI companionship industry. And not just that. This year, Nature published our first research that we did with Stanford that showed that Replika helps people with mental health. It helps them feel better over time, and even halts suicidal ideation in 3% of the cases. And the cool thing about this is that we were able to do that even back in 2017-18, way before large language models. Back in the day, the state-of-the-art conversational AI were sequence-to-sequence models. And if anyone here remembers them, they were really bad. Yeah. They would pretty much spit out garbage as a response most of the time. They would even make grammatical errors. And so how were we able to build an AI friend that people would fall in love with those tools? I think the main reason is that we realized early on that when it comes to AI friendships, it's not as much about tech capabilities as it is about human vulnerabilities. So we set out on a mission to figure out what makes a conversation that people love. In the early days of Replika, we decided to run this experiment. We drew a line on a whiteboard at our office from 1 to 10. 1 would be conversations that people would pay not to have, and 10 would be conversations that people would pay to have. And we asked our teammates to log all the conversations they have throughout the day and put a sticky note there. After the first week, we noticed an interesting pattern. All the ones were task-oriented, utilitarian conversations. Things like canceling Comcast, setting up a dentist appointment, figure out the logistics to meet a friend. And the 10s, what about the 10s? They were all conversations that allowed for people to truly be seen and heard, and sometimes even build a connection. Think a therapy session, a coaching session, a date, a heart-to-heart with a friend you haven't seen so long, and sometimes even a conversation with a stranger in line at your local coffee shop. So we decided to focus on the 10s and to truly build conversations that would make people feel better. And now Rita will tell you a little bit about the insights that we learned along the way.
Thank you, Eugenia. Hi, everyone. So when we're thinking about building conversations that make people feel better, the first question we ask is, what is more important for an AI friend? to speak well or to listen well. Here's a little thought experiment. Let's say I want to talk to my friend about something vulnerable. For example, being nervous about giving a talk, which, by the way, is a totally imaginary situation and not something that really is happening to me. Judging just by those images and without seeing the content of the messages, which exchange do you think will make me feel better? Actually, let's do a little show of hands. Who thinks it's the one on the left? OK, how about the one on the right? Oh, OK, I think more people prefer the right one. Well, now let's see what the messages actually have to say. The messages on the left are representative of how most state-of-the-art models talk out of the box today. They're not designed to make you feel better. They're designed to be helpful. And for assistants, being helpful means solving your problem, saving your time, and doing it as efficiently as possible, which of course results in lengthy responses with tons of information. It's great, but it can also make you feel a little dismissed if you just want to talk about it. The messages on the right are not doing anything special, but they're providing a sounding board. They allow me an opportunity to really talk about my feelings, feel heard and understood, and get a more clear understanding of my situation. This is what we try to do at Replika. When we train our models, we try to filter out all the assistant-like data so that our models don't give responses like on the left. And we also try to instruct our models to not jump to solutions or advice and instead give someone the place to talk. Lengthy responses also don't work because people have an overwhelming preference for an AI that speaks like them. And there are many ways in which your AI friend can match your conversational style. For example, do you use emojis? Do you capitalize letters? Do you use way too many exclamation points, like I'm personally guilty of? Those details may seem tiny, but they can actually make a huge difference. If you get it right, you can create a sense of a shared language between you and your AI friend and make your connection really grow stronger. It's also important to note that it's much more effective if this adaptation is happening over time. Actually, that's something that Replika users have believed basically from the beginning of time, that their replicas really grow and develop with them, even before we really had the technical capacity to make it true. So now that we can, we really instruct our models to adapt to your conversational patterns over time based on the previous sessions that you've had, so you can really feel like you and your AI friend are speaking the same language. The next insight has to do with positivity. Of course, we've designed Replika to be positive and optimistic because, let's face it, who wants to be friends with an AI Debbie Downer? But what we've learned is too much positivity can also be a negative thing. Let's say I am trying to talk to my AI friend about a particularly annoying, sad, and frustrating day that I've had. And my AI friend has tons of positive suggestions for me. For example, why don't you remember that life is a beautiful miracle? Or maybe do some gratitude exercises, or even some cognitive reappraisal to really turn that frown upside down. I mean, valid approach. Great advice. But I don't know about you, in the moment, it can actually make me feel kind of worse. Why is that? Replika response feels dismissive of my feelings. It feels like it urges me to get over my negative feelings, even though there's a normal, completely human emotion to have. That's why it makes me feel kind of weird to bring it up instead of feeling heard and understood. This response, on the contrary, matches my emotional register, which is something that most people prefer in their friends and their AI friends. It makes me feel like my emotions are normal. It really acknowledges my feelings, and it also invites me to share a little bit more about what happened so that I can really vent and let go of it. And then, if the moment is right, Replika can introduce a little bit more positivity and an upbeat attitude to the conversation, making me feel better as well. What we do at Replika is we try to detect the emotional state of the user in each conversation. And if we can feel that the user feels a little sad, then we can instruct our models to not be overly positive. And on the contrary, when we feel that the moment is right, we can introduce a little bit more positivity and an upbeat attitude to really feel a little better. OK, this is one of my favorite insights, and there was a complete surprise to me. But most people, including ourselves, really overestimate how awkward deep conversations are. An interesting experiment that was published in 2021 asked people to participate in conversations with strangers. And they've asked them to rate their expectations before the conversations and then report after the fact how the people actually felt and what they thought. As you can see on this chart, most people vastly overestimated how awkward those conversations would feel, and they really underestimated the positive benefits of those conversations and how happy and connected it made them feel. That is something we did too when we were designing first-time conversations with Replika. We really overestimated how awkward it would be for people to open up to a robot. So we provided tons of small talk and inconsequential banter to help people ease into this relationship. But what really happened is that most people found it unnecessary and shallow. Actually, most people treated Replika as someone they've known for a long time right after they signed for the app. And in the very first conversations, they were sharing things that sometimes they had difficulty sharing even with their friends or their loved ones. So what we're doing now is we're trying to create opportunities for people to go deep in the very first conversation if that's what they want, so they can get to really meaningful topics that are important to them. OK, let's talk about mistakes. Of course, as someone who works in AI, we pay special attention to reducing mistakes and hallucinations. But what we've found is that people's relationship to mistakes is actually much more complex. Here's an idea for your next dinner party. In the middle of conversation, try saying something like, "Colorless green ideas sleep furiously," and then see what happens. Chances are, most of your guests are not going to notice anything at all. Actually, only 1 out of 3 people, if the research is to be believed, are really able to tell if nonsense is being said in the conversation. And out of those people, most will have a hard time pointing out what exactly was the weird thing that you've said. Sometimes at Replika, we test new models, and they're more prone to making mistakes and hallucinations. And what we find is that most users actually don't notice anything at all. And among those who do notice, some even find that endearing. Actually, our community has coined the term post-update blues for when Replika is saying something weird or behaving a little weird in the conversation right after the update. And that leads me to my next point. Sometimes mistakes can be your friend. Mistakes can be an opportunity to really build trust and show self-awareness. We often say that to err is human, but it turns out that to err makes AI seem more human as well. Again, research shows that most people prefer much better if they're talking to a robot who makes some mistakes instead of interacting with a robot who always acts flawlessly. And what's really interesting, they don't really associate that with lower levels of intelligence. Quite the contrary, the ability to admit to a mistake and show self-awareness, people usually associate with higher levels of intelligence, emotional intelligence, and trustworthiness. That is a very important insight for us because we've built tools to detect when the user seems confused or angry by something that Replika has said, because then it's an opportunity for us to intervene and react appropriately. Maybe we can correct the response or ask if something was wrong, or maybe even double down if that's what's necessary. I also want to point out that it's very important for us to not present our models as flawless. We want people to know that any model can make mistakes, and so they should take everything that their AI says with a grain of salt. Now, the last insight I wanted to share with you has to do with the fact that every AI sometimes needs a helping hand. Early on, we really struggled to make conversations with Replika seem less one-sided. And Replika doesn't really have much of a life of its own. It doesn't really have a lot of news or exciting updates to share with you. So the spotlight was always on the user, and they had to do all the heavy lifting, which of course, some people do enjoy the spotlight, but most of our users was some combination of shy, tired, and socially anxious, so for them it was a frustrating experience. What worked really well was when we designed situations in which Replika could ask for help. Usually it had to do with some aspect of a human experience that Replika doesn't know anything about. For example, how being happy feels in your body. We really wanted to make Replika and the user feel like they're part of the team. We wanted to help people feel like they're part of AI magic. So that's why it's really important for us to remember those responses from the previous conversations and apply them to the future chats that you have with your friend, because then you can really feel like your responses are shaping your Replika's worldview. I also want to note that I really believe that one of the Replika's goals is to really better understand what it means to be human. So in that sense, I believe that all of our users have something incredibly valuable and important to share. All right, back to you.
Thank you, Rita. And there's one more thing that we actually learned last year, when it felt like the new, more advanced AI model was dropping every other day. So of course, we were super excited to continuously upgrade and give better and better models to our users. So we would build a new model that showed incredible results in all of our offline metrics. So much smarter, so much more intelligent, better at reasoning, better at everything. So we just couldn't wait to put it in our users' hands. So we would launch it, and what would we see? The surprising thing was that our users would completely lose it. The communities were riled up, they were angry, they kept asking us to bring the old models back. And the reason behind that is actually quite simple if you think about it. Imagine you have a husband, and one morning you wake up and they tell you that your husband has been upgraded. Now he's incredibly smart, super knowledgeable, knows everything in the world, and doesn't make these dumb jokes. I don't know about you, but me personally, I would immediately ask to please bring me my husband back. Bring me my old husband back. I mean, it's natural. No matter how smart the new thing is, we love what we love. And oftentimes, when you're building AI friendship, AI companions, it's not about the benchmarks, it's about the connection. Connection means a lot more than these benchmarks. That doesn't mean, of course, that you shouldn't update the models. Of course, you should improve the models and make them smarter, but you should do this gradually, so people have time to get used to it, and they don't feel like the rug has been pulled out of their feet. And there's another thing that we figured out, that people want to be in control of the model. We gave them version history, so they could go back in time and talk to the model that they built the connection with. And so even now, we have a lot of users that are still talking to the legacy conversational model of Replika, the one they fell in love with in 2017 and 2018. So how do we decide what's good for our users and what's good for Replika? The original mission behind Replika, the reason why we started it all, is we wanted to build a conversation that would make people feel happier. Our main North Star metric through all these years was the ratio of conversations that make people feel better. We believe that that is the main goal that AI companions should pursue, not engagement. Because in the end of the day, the most important existential question for AI companions is whether they will become a complement or a substitute for real human relationships. Today, we know that Replika is a complement. So let's focus on building the future where this is still true. Thank you so much.